All right, so today we're going to try to wind this up, and this is, uh, I'm even though my head is very small, I am swamped. Well, maybe because it's very small, I am swamped with trying to congeal all of this stuff into 45 minutes or something, but I'll do my best. We're going to do it historically and actually start. You may think this stretches the definition of philosophy, but not as far as I'm concerned. So start with the fact that what I'm going to do is hang this on the framework of um, Hegel's dialectic. And you may think that's nonsense, but it's a way to structure a treatment of history, just a way. There's a thousand ways. There's a lots of different ways that I could try to uh, summarize everything that happened. And I'm just going to do this one because Hegel is kind of useful. So we start out with, I don't know, 13 billion years or say 9 billion years of nothingness, and then all of a sudden some slime starts to grow on this obscure planet in the universe, and it's very peculiar, and there's not a man, jack, boy, or woman among us right now that can tell you why or how that happened. Uh, and for that reason, I'm sympathetic with people who believe in, who still believe in myths about how it happened. I mean, what are you going to do? You have this will, as Aristotle said, this will or desire to understand, and there is no understanding how life began. So what are you going to do? Well, I sympathize with people
Huh?
who just say, well, there was a
Where are you?
creator and he made it
Well, I
happen.
stopped.
I'm somewhat um, sympathetic with that because what else are you going to do?
Want us on
Anyway,
the screen?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay.
uh, who's that? Anyway, so what happens is for another few billion years, a
You,
bunch of very complicated stuff happens that we also don't understand, like mitochondria getting eaten by larger things and then living inside the larger things, which enabled life to get more complicated because mitochondria would supply more power to the cells. And eventually, critters crawled up on the land, say 500. I mean, the multi cellular critters began about 500 million years ago. And then, I don't know, whatever, 300 million, they started to get up on the land, plants and animals. And I'm willing to assign the word consciousness to everything, no matter how small there was a Scientific American article a while back that was examining the idea of consciousness, and the conclusion was just like turtles, it's consciousness all the way down is how they put it. That, and I'm willing to go with that because what consciousness is, I mean, geez, let's not say I'm defining consciousness, but as opposed to inert matter, which the rest of the universe, so far as we know, is composed of, consciousness responds to stimulus and threats. I'm just willing to say, as a minimal definition of consciousness, that even the most primitive uh, microbes respond to changes in the environment. And no inert piece of matter, the moon doesn't respond to changes in the environment, not intentionally. And so consciousness somehow, over a period of many million years, resulted in um, human beings. And this was just an imaginably complex uh, amount of reshuffling and cutting of genetic material. It's just beyond comprehension, which is another reason why I'm sympathetic with people who don't believe in evolution, because it just seems impossible. If you really consider how unlikely it is, it does seem impossible. So I'm kind of sympathetic. I know it's kind of seems ignorant, but I'm kind of sympathetic with somebody who just plugs in an understanding because the rest of us don't really understand it. So it's kind of a fair accusation in its own way. Okay, well, the first step, if we're going to use the Hegelian kind of structure of understanding the progression here, that first um, experience of life is what Hegel would call immediate. There's nothing between the experience of whatever these conscious beings are and themselves. There's nothing between. There's nothing mediating, and that's one of Hegel's big uh, concepts is the mediation, something between you and the object. There is no um, mediation. And believe it or not, that incomprehensible paragraph I read from Hegel last night addresses this exact thing. And in his very grandiose language, that's exactly what he's saying in his way, that there's nothing between the critter and the world except his perceptions. And the first moment, which is what Hegel would call it, in the dialectic, would be the invention of language by maybe, we don't know, it could have been um, Homo erectus, it could have been Neanderthals, but at least it was us that had language, and maybe 200 or 300,000 years ago. And then the next thing that happened was, okay, so that's the first step in the Hegelian dialectic, the mediation. So now we have something that we can symbolize our experiences with, some tool that we can say, this is what this is. And that is a mediation between our just direct, immediate experience of something and an understanding of it that we can describe with words, with terminology. And the first mode of description that we know of was mythology. So every culture that we know of has a story that they tell about what's going on, and that's how they understand things. And as far as we know, we can't, again, just only speculate. As far as we know, those lasted for a couple 100,000 years. I don't know when the first myth was created, but it was a way of understanding or comprehending the universe and your place in it. And it wasn't until the Greeks. So, as far as we know, mythology might be 100,000 or more years old. People telling, because we have this, as Aristotle said, we have this desire or will to understand. Well, how are you going to understand? Well, you make up stories of people like you that created the universe, like gods. They were like us, and, but they were super powerful, and so they invented the universe, like God or like Yahweh or Maui or whatever your God is. We have a myth that explains to us how we got here and what our relationship is to the universe. And these myths were very anthropomorphic. There probably are myths that I don't remember or can't bring to mind where an animal creates the universe. I'm not sure about that. That's a good question for you're nodding your head, Peter. I can't hear you.
Uh, can you hear
Yes,
me
now,
now?
yes.
I think there are North American Indian myths where
Yeah,
an
I
animal
think so, but I
creates Mother
can't point to
Earth.
one.
I think a raven is one of the possible creators. I'm not sure. It's not a subject I know in any way deeply,
Right.
but
Well, in
I'm
any
pretty
case,
sure
we
that
it was
there are animal creators,
Too. Probably African too.
right. So,
probably African.
and
I don't know
anyway,
that.
we have an anthropomorphic mythology, primarily anthropomorphic, and that's because it's something we can relate to. It's something we can comprehend and understand. And to this day, it's very hard to comprehend how non-anthropomorphic the universe is. It's really hard for us to grasp it. So anyway, the next moment in the dialectic, I've said the first step was the invention of language. And then the next step would have been the invention of stories to tell ourselves what is really here. And then the next step didn't happen, as far as we know, until the Greeks and Thales. And what they did, the Greeks, Thales and the Milesians and all the pre-Socratics and the Atomists, Democritus and Leucippus, these guys described a view of the universe that wasn't anthropomorphic, that was based on more or less mechanical understandings of what the universe was made of, and not so much origin stories like how it came into existence, but stories about not stories, but descriptions that were meant to be scientific and based on observation of what the world was we saw. And Anaxagoras, this wasn't necessarily well received. Anaxagoras was banished from Athens for this kind of teaching. And then we have a little later, we have Aristarchus and Eratosthenes, and those guys uh, were astronomers. And Eratosthenes, as you know, described the world as being round and was able to measure it within a fairly high degree of accuracy, given his tools. And then Aristarchus, who figured out, not from the way that you might think, but he figured out that the Earth must be orbiting the sun. Uh, I would say this is another step in the dialectic, and this one's astronomical because it asserts that the universe is not centered around us. And that's kind of I would say, a new idea and that the reason people rejected it until the church, of course, or up until the uh, Galileo and after, the reason that they had difficulty accepting that is because of the centricity of the human mind and spirit in the world that we could understand and relate to. It was very hard to relate to a universe that we were we weren't the center of. Now, I mentioned at one point that these are in this dialectic I'm describing, the way I'm describing it, and once again, this is not like the truth. This is a way to hang this on, one of many ways to hang it on, uh, is various steps that are away from innocence. They are, each one of them ends a certain period of human innocence, I believe. So the with the predominance and the rise of science over mythology, we start to see a world that's hard to conceive for us, that is not controlled by powers that are like us or anything like us, or perhaps even worse, not controlled by any powers. They're completely mechanical and lifeless and soulless. And yet, that is what the rise of science, um, the world that the rise of science portrayed to us. Um, Now, in between the Greeks and the rise of science, we had Christianity. And this was along the lines of what I just suggested, a kind of rejection of the fact that the world is impartial and cold. And it is a reassertion of the godlike nature of the creation and that the gods are paying attention to us once again. Even some of the Greeks said the gods, yes, they exist, but they're not paying any attention to us. That was uh, that was true of some of the Greeks, but the Christians say no. The one of the essential things about God is the attention he pays to us. And then towards the end of the Christian period, there was an attempt to meld these two together with Aquinas. I'm not going to call this a new moment in the development, but Aquinas was of the opinion that we couldn't imagine that God would have created our ability to reason and then created a world that didn't answer to our reason. So the idea was that if we used rationality, we would never come up with a conclusion rationality and observation. We would never come up with a conclusion that contradicted Scripture because Scripture was a foregone conclusion. It was the actual word of the deity. And so it must correspond to our reason, which is God given. And that's what Aquinas thought and put a tremendous amount of work into demonstrating. I don't think it's a good idea to dismiss any of these guys out of hand. That's what you want to do. You want to say, okay, well, he's nonsense. He's nonsense. I don't think that's a enlightening way of approaching these guys. If you're going to dismiss them, you want to understand why they said what they said and what the force was behind it. Otherwise, it's superficial. Just dismissing them is superficial. Okay. Then going on ahead of Aquinas, we find Hume, who is going to basically disprove the points that he makes, that Aquinas makes. He's basically going to cut the rug out of the foundation that Aquinas tried to build and the link between rationality and Christian belief. And a little earlier than that, Hobbes reasserts a mechanical kind of view of the universe, although he's such a coward. Unlike some guys, he hedges his bets and he says, what I'm saying is actually consistent with Scripture, which is ludicrous. I don't see how I don't know whether he actually convinced himself of that or he was such a coward that he had to put it in the second part of the Leviathan just to make sure he didn't get burned at the stake. I'm not really sure what his motivations were, but it's clear to me that Hobbes can't be made, his fundamental observations cannot be made consistent with Christian belief or Scripture. Yeah, Peter.
I just ran into something in Fear and Trembling where Kierkegaard quotes with approval in Latin something Descartes said, which is basically, even though I'm doubting everything, I'm not going to doubt the doctrines that Holy Mother Church teaches us because I couldn't really do that. And Kierkegaard approves this, but I was kind of amazed that Descartes says that explicitly, that I'm doubting universally, but I'm not doubting the doctrines of the Catholic Church.
Well, of course, in the Meditations, Descartes once again brings up the ontological argument and believes, just like Aquinas did, that he has proved the existence of God, even if you dispute, if you doubt everything you can and you come back to, I think, therefore I am. He believes that from that premise, you can conclude that God exists, which is it's not a very good proof, but that's what he's convinced himself of. And so Descartes' whole program is meant to answer rational criticisms of Christian or of proofs like Aquinas's proof. His whole program is saying, okay, I'm going to doubt everything just to show you guys, to show you up, you smart guys that are rational. I'm going to show you up because I'm going to doubt everything I can doubt, and I'm going to prove to you I still can prove God's existence. I mean, that's his whole program, Descartes' program. So he always has an ulterior motive, even in the midst of his doubting. He's not really going to ever doubt. It's just like what you said, Peter. He's not really going to doubt that God exists. Okay. Uh, this rational disputation or refutation of Aquinas and the rational support of Christianity is what I'm going to call another moment in the dialectic. Dialectic, remember, is uh, um, we've used the word pendulum, but that's not really fair because in the dialectic, we remember we take a step and then we reject that step and view it objectively from a distance. And then finally, we come back to a place which is neither the place we were at before, nor is it the rejection of that. It's a new, higher, and more all encompassing stage of Hegel's dialectic. So that's where we come. Uh, that's how the dialectic proceeds, and what happens with Descartes, for example, is that he's saying, okay, reject everything. I'm going to do that. I'm going to play that game, but I can still come back to God existing. Um, Now, by the time we get to, okay, let me just say one more thing, and that is Darwin comes up. Now we're going to advance to Kant first, and then Darwin. Kant, very bright guy. What Kant says is, yeah, all that stuff works. All those arguments work so long as they're within the phenomenal world. So we can use logic and observation, like in other words, science, Newtonian science. We can use that to prove whatever can be proved within that um, context. It's not like we throw out rationality. It's still very useful. However, there's a limit to it. And on the other side of the limit is what we call the thing in itself or the noumenal world. And in that world is where God exists and value. Value can't be demonstrated within the phenomenal world, according to Kant. You can't prove scientifically. This was Hume's fork. Uh, no, guillotine. He has a fork and a guillotine, two instruments. Uh, Hume's guillotine was that no amount of observation will reveal to you what the right thing is. And if you remember, we called this the naturalistic fallacy. You can't find or is ought. That's another thing we discussed. You can't discover what ought to be from observing what is. There's no amount of doing that. And so I think I used the example of uh, the discrepancy in income. No matter how much income discrepancy you could demonstrate, Hume will say that that doesn't tell you anything about whether it's wrong or right to have this discrepancy. That's something that comes from value, and value, what Kant's going to say is, yes, you can have values, but you can't say that they're part of the phenomenal world or the scientifically observable world. Okay, so the um, the limitation, what Kant calls the limitation of reason to make room for faith, is that yes, our rational and observational skills developed by first by the Greeks are completely legitimate, but there's a limit to what they can tell us, and that is uh, what what ought to be, what our values ought to be, and this led to um, the uh, Hegelian and existential movement, which said, okay, well, the instrument we're using to perceive the universe is limited, like Kant says, but it's also, they wanted to say, not static. It's not one single thing, and our consciousness develops in concert with what we perceive in the world. In other words, the world and consciousness progress together. They don't progress. We don't get closer and closer to something that's actually out there because Aristotle, going back to Aristotle, whatever a thing is known only in our mind. It isn't known to the universe that a tree is a tree, but our mind knows it. So that Hegel wants to say that tree really isn't out there except in our mind, which is not inconsistent with either Aristotle or Berkeley. They both say this. Berkeley says to be is to be perceived. We didn't cover Berkeley, but that's what he says. So there is no place in the universe that holds the idea of what the earth is, what the universe is, except in our minds. The universe itself doesn't know what it is, as it were. So Hegel will say that that instrument that is perceiving the world develops. It isn't just a static thing. Like Kant, I don't think considered the mind as being something that would progress. He was more or less concerned with the things that we perceive abiding with the laws of, say, Newtonian physics. And the Newtonian physics is something our mind constructs, but he doesn't consider that our mind could construct something else, which we'll get to in a minute. Um, okay, so the Hegelian insight led to a bunch of stuff where people were making grand statements about uh, life. And that would be Hegel, Marx, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, all the existentialists and phenomenologists and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to describe the human experience in a way that left the door open for change and development of either the individual experience or the historical experience of everyone together, of history together. Um, and as we said, this could lead to a lot of incomprehensible jargon and terminology. So the response against that, again, this is another movement in the dialectic. Going back to Kant, one movement in the dialectic was to limit consciousness or reason, and then the next movement was to introduce change as part of consciousness. It's not just one static thing, it goes through change. And then the difficulty in describing the human experience was noticed by the Vienna Circle and G.E. Moore and a bunch of these people who said, well, wait a second, we've gotten ahead of ourselves here. Let's just try to get back to the basics and understand what language is doing. And so that led to the verification principle and uh, a concentration on getting very clear on what every, because the language is our instrument for understanding the world. And insofar as we don't understand language, we don't understand what we're saying about the world. So there was a desire to get very clear on what we said, and this is represented in Wittgenstein's Tractatus. Okay, so there's another moment in you're rejecting these grand theories and trying to get very focused on individual things like science does. So that in chemistry, we don't have broad things about how, this chemical is really the father of all, we don't talk in metaphorical terms. We try to talk in very, very concrete terms in science. Well, that's what the logical positivists and the Vienna Circle and so forth were trying to do. Then comes along Wittgenstein, and Wittgenstein says, we are as sloppy or naive in our understanding what language does as we are in the biology of living things. It's not something we have a clear angle on. And every picture, okay, Nietzsche says that any system or picture you have of reality is going to have to leave off 90% of what reality is because it's an oversimplification of what the has to be an oversimplication of what the world is. Everything we say is true is leaving out the 90% of things that aren't covered by that statement. Well, Wittgenstein doesn't say that because he wouldn't say something like that. But in the philosophical investigations, he does systematically point out, kind of the way Socrates does, little things where we've had an overly naive view of what we were actually saying when we said words. So he gets very meticulous, and it's kind of psychedelic, actually. I mean, we think of these guys, especially Wittgenstein, the early Wittgenstein, as being very stiff, cold. That's why people reject them. They're very stiff and cold. They're not making us these grand, passionate statements that move us. They're not doing that. Well, if you look at the philosophical investigations, there are a lot of passages in there that are very psychedelic. I mean, they're just so strange because you think you have a picture in your mind of what is going on in your mind or somebody else's mind. And then Wittgenstein says, well, look at what you're saying right here. Look at it very closely, because I think you're misusing that word, and you're putting language on a holiday is his term for it. Language, you're using language in a way which has lost its moorings to reality. And he wants to pull us back from that. And then, of course, he says, what not be spoken of, what cannot be spoken of, thereof we must remain silent. So that's where we come to. Now, that's another step in the dialectic. I'm sorry, this is an artificial structure that I'm putting on the whole thing with the objective of having some kind of structure at all. And then the final thing is that I would say is the final blow to the um, innocence of the human being is quantum mechanics. If we go back to Plato, you'll remember that in the Meno, Plato thinks he has demonstrated that there is some resonance, some participation, some harmony between the human mind and the cosmos. That's exactly what Plato thinks. And it's exactly what Einstein thought. And that's why Einstein was profoundly upset by quantum mechanics. Because in quantum mechanics, we have experiments that have been done thousands of times that demonstrate that common sense cannot describe reality. And that's very upsetting. It was very upsetting to Einstein because it upsets the very program we started off with, mythology, is how to comport ourselves or understand the universe in such a way that we fit. And so first we did that with gods, and then we did it with science, thinking that, okay, our ability with science is allowing us to uh, have a more comprehensive view of the universe and therefore feel more at home. And then with Kant, um, we say that, okay, there's a limit to that, but nevertheless, the limit is still within that limit. It's reasonable, and we can trust our rationality. But now, what's happening with quantum mechanics is we can't even trust that, that our minds are capable of comprehending the physical universe. Forget about values and forget about religious entities and things like that. We can't even comprehend to our satisfaction the physical universe that we inhabit. One of my first of two instincts that led me to study philosophy. One that I know I've described them before. One of them was not wanting to be scammed by somebody telling me what life was all about without my doing my own examination. I didn't want to just accept something that somebody said. And the other one was I don't want to die without knowing what neighborhood I've been living in. And so that prompted me to study science and philosophy with the, I don't know if the faith, but the at least the hypothesis that there were people out there that knew what was going on. And I best do my damnedest to understand what they have to say without, because I don't want to leave the planet without knowing what the hell I've been experiencing the best I can. And that butts up against, I'm afraid, uh, quantum mechanics to a degree. Now, this might sound bleak. I don't feel it's bleak at all. I mean, it may be kind of a bleak picture, but my feeling is that it's all just this vast miracle that is incomprehensible and uh, so broad and vast and magical. That's my experience of it. And I don't really care that quantum mechanics is throwing cold water on that. It's not going to stop me from thinking how miraculous this progression has been from slime to Wittgenstein. All right, that's in a nutshell what I wanted to say today. So, anybody have any remarks, criticisms? I'm not sure much of that can be refuted, I don't think I've told you things that are false. But you could have completely different interpretations of what I've just said. Yeah, Peter.
I think even without being an Orthodox Freudian, you can add Freud to the list as he himself did. He wasn't especially modest. You know, Copernicus said the Earth revolves around or forms of life that have meaning and unconscious and the and one of the things he said, I think, was dark, unwilling Anthony.
Ooh,
That might be an exaggeration, but I think it goes very, very much along with some of the things you've been saying about the, you know,
you're breaking up.
Unfortunately, I
okay.
missed most of that,
It
Peter,
goes along,
because you were breaking
I'm
up.
sorry.
I'm very sorry to say.
Say it
Uh,
again. Say it again. We'll
Uh,
try again.
well, I was going to kind of introduce Freud to
yeah,
the,
Freud. I heard that much.
yeah, that he believed that one of the things he had done in showing that there is an unconscious mind that we can learn about, but only very indirectly, was part of a progression that goes from Copernicus saying the Earth does not is not the center of the universe, saying we are not absolutely unique because we come from lower life forms, to Freud saying the ego is not master in its own house. And at one point in, I think, new introductory lectures on psychoanalysis, Freud says dark, unfeeling, and unloving forces control human destiny. That's too sweeping, even as an account of Freud, but it's a very powerful statement, I think.
Yeah, I don't I didn't include Freud in that summary just because we didn't talk about him
Yeah.
except marginally. So I didn't include him, but I would agree that he's one of those guys that put another chink in the or took out another brick in the idea of human uh, harmony with the universe we live in. The idea that it's dark is doesn't resonate with me. It is more, I would use the word cold rather than dark. Dark sounds like sinister. I would use completely cold, that we are the result of, and by the way, Freud thought he was being a scientist. He didn't think he was being a fuzzy new age kind of guy. He thought he was being scientific. And Freud is somebody, I mentioned this before, Hobbes and Freud and Schopenhauer and Marx and Nietzsche are all guys that I think we should uh, digest along this path to where we are right now. But I just didn't include him because we didn't talk about him at length during the class. That's all. None of those guys, unfortunately, none of those guys I just mentioned can be justified by empirical science. Freudians will admit, I mean, there's dyed-in-the-wool Freudians that have spent their careers trying to empirically verify the id, the ego, and the superego. And they find the concepts are just not susceptible to scientific definition of the sort that would allow us to empirically verify by empirical tests whether they exist or not. That's the problem. And I think the same could be said of Marx, that the 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 concepts, we get what's being said, but they can't be validated by scientific methods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And Wittgenstein at one point said in conversation, Freud is constantly claiming to be scientific, but what he offers is speculation,
No.
something that precedes even the formation of a hypothesis. And I think that's true, but I think it's very fruitful speculation.
Right. I would agree, that all those guys, Hobbes, you'd be naive to think that people aren't acting selfishly. I mean, nobody, that's a silly thing to think. You'd be naive to think with Marx that nobody's actually acting according to economic interest. That would be naive. And you'd be naive to think, like Freud says, that a lot of your character was the result of very early life experiences. Of course, those are all true. But to what degree they can be quantified in the way that we like in science, that's the problem. And none of them can be because human behavior is so difficult. Nobody has the no matter how confident the guys online will tell you they are about what motivates men or women or whatever corporate heads, uh, it can't be reduced the way that we'd like it to be reduced. Again, that's why people believe in myths, because we can't come up with a simple understanding. Even the best minds can't come up with a simple understanding. So what are you going to do? You tell yourself a story. I'm afraid that's kind of what we all do.
So Tony, one of the things that was interesting to me was not just, as you say, what people wrote and what they talked about their quest for understanding, but what they actually did. So the fact that Wittgenstein did this writing, which I found very, I mean, it makes me want to go off and read some of at least the easier bits, as you say. But he wound up teaching what, kindergarten or something, and working in gardens. And you know, so the people who are trying their hardest to figure out language and ideas and to understand, in fact, are also translating, or at least are in their own lives finding a path that looks fairly straightforward and simple. And I mean, that's kind of, here we are. I mean, we're getting older. We're all sort of on the older side, although my father would have said we were in late middle age for a few more years. He called it late middle age up until he was about 92. He was old, you know, still driving, but we don't have life choices to make at this point about our careers or whether or not to have children or whatever. But we still go about daily life, and it just is really, this has been a very thoughtful exploration of how people try to figure out what's what are the answers. We're obviously all still curious because we're still here listening to you for the last whatever 4 months or something and trying to understand better. But at the same time, like the philosophers, we turn around and go out and tend our gardens, bake cookies for our grandchildren, whatever. And I guess that so I don't think it's without profit or benefit to learn to have these conversations. But I guess I don't want to, or I don't know, it hasn't unsettled me especially to have at the end of the day the sense that no, despite all my work in medical research, there are things I'm never going to understand because they're not comprehensible. And starting with, you know, what the human mind is doing and how it goes wrong with, it's, anyway, I just wanted to say thank you and sorry about the sort of babble here about it, but
No, that's all good. I'm recalling there's an actor and I can't think of his name. He was on talk show. He's a prominent actor, and the only role I remember him being in was there's a Peter Falk like very funny movie about him being a CIA spy and his daughter's getting married. What is the name of that? Oh God, this is a terrible description
No,
because I
There's
can't
the-
think of what
it's the in-laws.
the in-laws. And do you remember who played the father that kept going? Oh my God,
It was awful.
Robert De Niro?
who was it?
Robert De Niro?
No, it wasn't Robert De Niro.
Oh.
It was he was a prominent actor. He was very erudite and well educated, which is not true of all actors. And he used to be on Tonight Show. Anyway, uh, he said, I think a really wise thing. He said, if you think somebody's a genius, but he hasn't spent any time trying to figure out how to live the happiest, most fulfilling life, then I'd have to question your idea of genius. And he says that that the great geniuses did that. Either they were so obsessed that they lived miserable lives, maybe like Van Gogh or somebody like that, or most of them. He said that's he. I think I remember he specifically made that as an exception. Most of the great geniuses were well recognized during their day and celebrated, and they lived wonderful lives. And he said that's because they're smart enough to seek out the things that are truthful and beneficial and fulfilling to them. And so to the point you made now, Wittgenstein, I didn't mention this. Wittgenstein was gay, and this has actually never been certified that I know of, but it's generally recognized as being true. The reason being gay was illegal during his time of life, and so he was kind of hermetic and was very apparently guilty about being gay. He was made to feel great sense of guilt about it because he was very religious, despite what you may think about his writings. He had a profound sense of uh, religious empathy or feelings, and he thought that he was violating those, or he'd been made to think he was violating those by his sexuality. So that's another little additional biographical detail about him. But at the end of his life, he said, as he was dying, he said, "Tell everyone I've had a wonderful life." So uh, that's kind of reassuring when you know that he's been had a life of some distress.
Tony,
Anybody else?
That's lovely.
yeah, I'd like to say that this course has, I mean, to the extent that I've been able to participate in it, I have found it so ambitious and comprehensive and really a joy. And some of the questions that arise for me now, it seems like we have um, a kind of agreement among philosophers that philosophy has to be reconciled with science to the extent possible. And in a way, it's interesting how science has given us mythology in the sense of grand stories about where did the universe come from, how did it start, how has it changed over time, when did we come along, what's our relationship to other living things. I mean, all of those we now uh, initially were answered by myth, and now we look to answer them more by empirical investigation, tied to theories that make the that are consistent with the empirical investigation. And one of the things that astounds me is that I really believe in this idea of intellectual progress, that we truly know more than humans did in the past. And it's kind of astounding to me to realize with the Trump administration how many of our fellow human beings in the United States don't think that science has anything more valid to tell us than reading the Bible. And that when the two contradict, that we should go with the Bible and drop the science. And the attack on universities and the Smithsonian and on is just so distressing to me that there's so many people who would just willingly undo all this thinking, revise all this thinking, dismiss this careful thought. I just it seems like one of these times when the library at Alexandria is about to be put on fire again. And I want to, that's one thing. And the other thought that I keep wrestling with is that we stop with Wittgenstein, but we have people like, I mean, one of my favorites is Noah Yuval Harari in Israel, that I think has really worked to write books about the grand progression of intellectual thought throughout human history, just as you have tr tried so well to describe. And he ends up sort of talking about artificial intelligence and what is it, and what does it tell us about consciousness, and what does it tell us about language. And these interesting things that sort of pop out of artificial intelligence as you feed the computers huge amounts of text, and most of that text is in English, and is the large language model depends a lot on the English language, but increasingly the text that it's scanning is in Chinese, which is a really different way of representing ideas. And I was interested in this little article that I read that large language models they're discovering will alternate back and forth internally between Chinese and English in trying to answer questions that get at what is general intelligence and how close is it getting to it. Anyway, I just really admire people who want to reconcile and make sense of these extraordinary things that are happening, both in the field of artificial intelligence, but also in neuroscience, trying to understand how the brain thinks at a physical level as well as a symbolic level, and how large language models are intentionally structured to resemble the human brain in terms of levels of neuron connections and pathways that are either increasingly weighted more or weighted less. Anyway, I'm just, do you have any thoughts about where we're headed and who's leading the show?
Okay,
Eh.
first, as far as AI goes, I learned stuff that new about AI every day. In fact, just before we met today, I was watching a video of a discussion of AI. The problem with that is that you can't really read books about it. It's happening so fast. You kind of
Yeah.
have to try to keep up online with what's going on. And just today, I heard somebody who is in a position to know pull in their horns a little bit about how soon we're going to get artificial general intelligence, and they were pointing out I don't want to go into it in detail, but they were pointing out specific things that large language models do not do well at, and this can be scary or not, but they weren't presenting it as being some kind of nightmare. They were just saying, but one other thing I just wanted to say in response is that with maybe Gerald, maybe somebody knows. There is a physicist that says, well, so what? We don't have to have a grand theory of everything. They don't talk to each other. That's fine. And I don't know, Gerald. Maybe you can tell me in a minute who that guy is if you know. And the other thing, because that was very troubling to Einstein, the other thing that is similar to that is Wittgenstein's idea of language games. We don't have to have the same exact structure of what we're saying to say something religious that we do to say something that is scientific. It doesn't have to have the same kind of empirical or rational foundation. And if it did, we wouldn't be able to say hardly anything that we say. We wouldn't be able to express our feelings or anything if everything had to have that kind of a structure. And so Wittgenstein, in a way, calms you down and says, no, you don't have to necessarily disagree with somebody who says, God bless you. You could just let it slide. We understand what he means. Anyway, first of all, Doug has his hand up, but Gerald, do you know who that physicist is?
I don't. I don't know
Okay.
who he is,
It might
but
be Susskind.
that could be. That could be. No, I mean, as you've gone through your survey today, it's and you end up with, well, then quantum mechanics just breaks everything. Yeah, I kind of go back into my little physics model of the world, that in any given situation, you pick a small piece of the environment and you work in that. And if it's Newtonian, you don't need to worry about quantum mechanics or general relativity. But if you do, you move your point of view, and in a way, the breaking of stuff with quantum mechanics kind of just says that's where we are. That is how our minds are always going to work, is to try to understand the world in a small part of the situation we're dealing with. And one thing I would like to add, I've missed so many pieces of this series, it's just been frustrating. But even with that, I really appreciate the trajectory that we've seen and this watching of the development of thoughts and how it goes. And I really have got many hours to go back and try to fill in the gaps, but I really appreciate the perspective that this is provided. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's just a matter of being the sportscaster who's those guys did all the work. I'm just kind of doing the play-by-play. But yeah, I enjoyed having you all with me here for sure. And every time I go through these guys, and this may be the last time, I learn something new about them, whether it's from other people or from just reconsidering from a different angle. Doug, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think you might have been thinking or about Richard Feynman. I have a quote
I
that
don't think it's
says,
Feynman, but good.
well,
Yeah, I love
he,
Feynman.
he said, but I don't have to know an answer. I don't feel frightened by not knowing things,
Yeah.
by being lost in the mysterious universe without having any purpose, which is the way it really is, as far as I can tell. It doesn't frighten me.
I feel the same way, and I love Feynman.
Yeah, I want to
Otis,
second that. I think that basically what you told us in your summary today is that we started out not knowing how things work, and we ended up not knowing how things work. But in between,
so why even do all this?
well, but we've done our due diligence.
Yeah,
With your help, we've done a damn good attempt at trying to figure it out. And now we can sit back and, you know, appreciate the mystery of it all.
I think the term due diligence is a good one because I think what was it, Laurel a minute ago saying that she's done all this research and she still doesn't understand everything, but she has done her due diligence. She hasn't slacked off and just ridden a wheel for 70 years. She's been really trying to understand, and that's a good feeling, I think, that you at least you put in your hours to not just take everything for granted. Anne, you got your hand up?
Well, I kind of do. I feel kind of shy about this, but it seems to me that we've ended up at a place where poetry begins. So I did want to offer to do a course on American poetry if anybody like that.
Oh, great.
Wouldn't then please don't say okay. I think it would start with Whitman and come up to the present time. And then I think it could be really fun. I could probably only do it once a week because my poet laureate stuff is kind of kicking into gear.
How are
But
you
I would
doing?
really enjoy that because I love poems. Huh?
That would be great, Anne.
How am I doing?
How are you doing health-wise?
Oh, okay. I can walk without a cane or anything,
Oh,
and my hip
what?
still hurts some, but
That's
I'm
good.
being stubborn and I've got a bunch of cool public events coming up that I'm determined to be ready for when they come. Yeah, so
She would lead it.
I'm getting there. Yeah. And I started my favorite poem podcast series, which is really, really going to be so fun. I will watch one, which I did. Barry, you watch it. Emily Dickinson poem. But these are short little podcasts where I have 25 Mississippi poets lined up, each to do one once a month, and to choose a favorite poem that's in the public domain and read it and talk about it and talk about its writer. And these are like, 13-minute long podcasts that are being made by this guy I know who used to be my student, who's now a professional podcast maker. So it's going to be so fun to see what people come up with.
A new career out there.
That sounds
it didn't used to exist.
great.
Barry, you had your hand up?
I
And your
just want
My only problem with
Oh, I'm
all of
sorry.
it is what?
You're breaking up.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, can you now? Yeah,
Well-
it's because I'm holding this thing up in the air, and so it wiggles around.
You want me to hold it?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
No?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
so if you would like to do it, then I would be happy to do it. As long as Tony, can we keep using your same Zoom link?
Yeah.
Because me creating a Zoom link would be the death of me. It would just not happen.
I know what you mean. Believe me, I know what you mean.
Good. Great. So I will send you guys. How many of you have read much American poetry?
Some.
Some. Great. Yeah, Deborah, I know. That's great. Good. Okay, my ideal audience, a bunch of people who might have a lot to discover. I will send you probably some poems by Whitman, and we'll start there and probably take a couple weeks on Whitman and then proceed to Dickinson and then up into the modernists at the beginning of the 20th century, who are some of the all-time greats, and just see where we get from there. Would that be fun?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's all
wonderful.
American though.
Well, I'm
And
going to do American. You
I
can talk
think
to Peter about doing British.
And I would encourage you to announce this to
Just
the
do your
whole 47 list and not just us, because I
Yeah.
think there are a lot of people in that larger group that would like to know about it.
I will. And let's start next Thursday.
Okay.
Okay, great.
In 1
Tony,
week,
thank-
right?
Yeah, that's in a week.
Done.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's
So
been great.
10,
Great,
10
thank you.
o'clock next Thursday then. Same place, same URL.
Right. Yeah, great.
Okay.
All right.
My daughter.
It's a good follow-up. And Anne, I happened to listen to your Dickinson podcast. It was great.
Oh,
Really efficient, 13 and a half minutes, and I learned a boatload.
it was so fun to do. It was really fun. Because, I've been teaching poetry for like 55 years. And I love to talk about poems with people. So it's going to be very empirical. The way I believe in teaching poetry is not just to make generalizations, but to look at poems and talk about poems, And obviously, you guys' input is more than welcome. Questions, telling me that I'm full of it, telling me that you hate so-and-so, telling me that you love it, whatever, Okay, great.
That'll be so much fun.
Fabulous.
Studying Russian or trying to keep my Russian up a little bit. My daughter, who has her PhD in Slavic literature, got me reading some of the shorter lyric poems in Russian. So I read some Akhmatova, and between the having to translate and having to think about it, it was a lot of fun and very challenging. And so I'm looking forward to starting off without the language disadvantage.
Yeah. She's great, though. She's just a great poet. That's great.
So Barry, you've been trying to get in here for a while.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Tony, for committing your time and all of your knowledge to this. It's been very enlightening and really, really riveting. And I also want to thank everybody else in this group, because I've learned a lot from all of you. And I'm really glad, Anne, that you want to keep this thing going and morphing into another chapter, because it'll be a way of keeping some of this community alive, which has been really, really nourishing. I've really, really appreciate it. And thank you all for putting the time and effort into it.
Yeah.
Second.
Deborah, you
Third.
Yeah, I just want to agree. I want to thank you so much, Tony. I've missed a few and listened to them later, so I super appreciated that you were able to figure out how to do that. That added a lot to the experience to be able to review, read the AI summary, and also just do it on my own schedule. So thank you for plowing your way not only through the history of Western philosophy, but also Zoom, which is much harder. And Alan, can you please tell me the name of that author, the Israeli person you were referring
The
to?
last name is Harari, Harari. And
Harari.
yeah, Noah Yuval Harari.
Thank you. Thank you.
Deborah's comment about all this raises the point, and maybe you want to be able to, how could an AI summary be done of your next thing or a speaker viewer? Is that something Tony would have to do for you because he's set up the whole system, or because
Well,
that's pretty valuable to have be able to go back if you miss something.
yeah, that just occurred to me. I sure can't, both time-wise and tech-wise.
Yeah, I hear
You know,
you.
it's like I had to hire a professional podcaster because I would lie awake at night thinking, oh my God, I want to do this podcast series and I don't even know where to start, you know?
Right.
I could do the recording, and here's the only problem I see is, I review every one of these things, including the summary, and I have to make corrections in it, and I wouldn't know how to do that with Ann's. But I could record them and publish them for you. I also edit them just a little bit. And I must say, Ann, just to forewarn you, I always find something I said that was really stupid in there. Actually, it's not so much really stupid. It's just I misspoke and said somebody's name where somebody else's name, and it just irks me. But I haven't bothered to go back, except one time I had to fix it. It was so bothersome. It was some kind of Kierkegaard thing. I had to just make a little note. Kierkegaard didn't say this. Anyway, I bet you won't have to deal with that because you're probably not as incompetent as I am, but I'm just warning you that it's kind of bracing to see your own mistakes. And
Yeah. But see, Peter's next to me and he can always correct my mistakes.
No.
Like, no, it's not born in China, you know?
oh boy.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, we'll just plan on meeting here next Thursday then. And it is set up, and I think we'll find out the hard way if it doesn't work. But if we all just show up with the same URL, and then you can, and you'll have to, do you still have the invite letter I sent a long time ago, the email? It has the URL and the passcode. Let me ask this. Does anybody...
I have the present one.
Yeah, that's
the new
right.
one.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
Do you have, do you guys ever have to enter the passcode?
Yeah, every
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can use that. Just send out, you don't have to, there's other stuff there probably on the Zoom invite, but you can just send out your description of what's going on with that URL and that passcode. And
Okay.
that should allow everybody to get in if you do what Alan suggested I guess it was Alan, with the wider audience. Barry?
So I'd say my opinion is that the video recording of the conversation is much more valuable than the AI
Yes.
summary. So if we,
Yes.
so if we lose the AI summary in this, moving to the next chapter, that wouldn't bother me particularly.
Okay.
Let me ask you this then. Which is the better view for you guys, speaker or gallery?
I like gallery.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do too. This is what I see, because if I had just the speaker view, I'd just see myself for an hour, I like to
Yeah,
see, and then nobody could raise their hand either. So
I like gallery, but I will say it's a weird experience when you're watching the replay and you realize that you're seeing yourself listening and you kind of want to respond and you realize you can't because it's a recording. It's an odd sensation, actually.
yeah, well, join the crowd. Like I feel like Tony, that was. Please restate that. Anyway, okay, well, that's good. That's all good for today. And you understand, you can always email me. You have my email if you have questions about that. But I'm pretty sure that if you just send out the URL, the same URL, the same passcode, and say, I'm going to be running a a poetry seminar online on Zoom. And if you'd like to join us, this is it. Hey, that brings up another question for you guys. These are not public as they are right now on Zoom. Would anybody object to them being public?
No.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't at all, as long as the poems I'm talking about are in the public domain.
Well,
But
I'm
when I
talking
do-
about, no, I'm talking about what we've done so far.
No,
That-
so far, but for the future, I'm talking poems that are not in the public domain, then I can't have them public without paying permits.
I wonder if that's true. That seems like it would
Yeah.
fall under fair use to me.
Yeah.
But so it's nobody has an objection if I make them public right now, because right now you can't find this online at all unless you know somebody that knows the URL.
Take
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to object, you can do it
my
privately with
physical
an
therapist
email
or
if you
I-
like.
Okay. And
So,
I'll think about.
I'm not objecting, but Anne, I want to say that, or Peter, you've been breaking up a lot today. And so if that happens next Thursday when Anne is trying to control the Zoom, so I don't know what the problem was.
Yeah, but they've been consistently breaking
I
up. I
think
don't know
we
if your
need-
internet is a problem.
We need to be closer to the power source, I think, is the main problem. Could you hear that?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Okay. If we're in a different room, I think it won't happen as much.
Okay,
Okay.
good. Because
Room where
yeah,
the
like
power source is.
And I'll
Like
think about
Deborah
the fair
says, if-
use issue.
it's one thing if you make a comment once in a while, but if you're running
Yeah,
the thing, and it
fair
breaks
use
up-
seems to cover it as far as I can see.
yeah,
Fine.
Poetry.
yeah. I'd be
we'll see.
surprised if you ran it up against any trouble with that. And if you do, I think the worst thing that would happen is that, well, first of all, when I say public, I mean that the YouTube videos are public. And
Right.
YouTube itself doesn't automatically trace of copyrights. When you post something, it does an automatic copyright check, and that's part of the posting. And I'd be surprised if anything was a red flag for that. But if it is, you can make it private. Like what we're doing right now is private, and so it doesn't violate the copyright laws, I'm pretty sure. But if I don't know, if I played you a Michael Jackson song, maybe it would trigger something, but otherwise, I'd be surprised if YouTube minded this. There must be hundreds of English teachers online reading poetry. I can't believe that doesn't exist. So I think it should be okay.
There's a there's a whole different mechanism for managing that problem.
And we have a lawyer.
I know.
No,
And that's
good.
actually an area I know something about.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but and we can solve that problem. I
Okay.
don't. We don't have to know everything to be able to take this, right? Isn't that what we just learned from our philosophy class? We don't have to understand everything.
Hey, Kim, Google, do you do copyright stuff? Because I know Kim was involved in showbiz.
Kim was on one. I'm internet law. You know,
Well,
I'm
so
on the
you're-
internet. I know internet and copyright and all that other
good.
stuff. I know that
Excellent.
stuff. I know that
Excellent.
stuff. Yeah. That's why I know that the training of an AI model using data scraped from the internet is considered fair use. If you pirate the stuff, that's different.
Very interesting. Man,
Different
oh,
problem.
man.
Different problem. So
Yeah, the AI
So
stuff.
pirating means selling it mainly?
pirating is pirating. You
Well,
know,
I understand, but how does that work? What
you have two pieces. One is if I download all your stuff and I stole it, let's say I've taken unauthorized copies of your stuff and I steal it and I use it to train my model. The training is fair use. Taking your stuff is still an infringement of your copyright. You know, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Pirating is pirating.
Yeah.
It's always the same. Yeah. But then we've had two significant decisions on this specific question in the last
Oh, right.
few months,
Cool.
both in the Northern District of California.
This sounds like it's a whole other hour in itself, discussing that. I'm very interested in that.
It's very interesting because it's the Briss is now on the edge of copyright.
Right.
What everybody's trying to figure this one out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway,
Yeah, this is a whole new field. Well, let's not go into that today, but I'd be interested in it sometime. So let's call it for today, and we'll meet you all in a week. And then Anne, if she has any difficulty setting this up to her satisfaction, I don't think she will, because like I said, just send out the URL and the passcode, and anybody should be able to get in.
Right.
Other than that, she can write me anytime about anything.
Yeah. And I think that if you start it, you have to hand the speaker over to her. You are the
Oh, that's true. For the speaker view,
Yeah,
I will be the speaker view. I'm not sure
yeah,
how to do that.
but
Do
you have a week to figure that out.
Oh my God. I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah. I'll look it up too. I will.
Thank you,
also-
Tony.
Great,
Yeah.
Neil.
This is fantastic, Tony. This is unbelievable. I don't think I get better than a C in this class, but I feel like I've learned a lot.
All right, guys. It's been wonderful meeting with you.
Bye,
and
everybody.
hopefully
Yeah,
see you
thank you
next
very
week.
much.
Bye, everybody, and thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.